All right. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit. Hear from Jesse Simons, who worked at an executive level for 20 years. I might not have that exactly correct, in the National Office of the Sierra Club, before co-founding a firm that is aggressively tackling the challenge of solar panel recycling. Among other things, Jesse will discuss how California is home to the most solar panels in the US, but also why his company established their first recycling facility in a different state. Jesse Simons, now the formal introduction, is co-founder and chief commercial officer at SolarCycle, a tech-driven solar circular economy platform. Prior to founding SolarCycle, Jesse served on the executive team of the Sierra Club as chief of staff and then national program director, overseeing a staff of $800 and $160 million annual organizational budget. He brings in-depth knowledge on climate and the circular economy and has extensive experience scaling and managing large teams in both entrepreneurial and established environments. Jesse's going to tell us about solar panel recycling, crisis or opportunity. Welcome, Jesse.
All right, thanks. So as Steve said, I'm Jesse. I'm a co-founder and chief commercial officer at SolarCycle. And SolarCycle was founded to be the leading circular economy company for the solar industry. That's our vision. The way we're going to do that is by creating a low-cost, sustainable, and scalable solution for the world's largest solar companies to reuse, repair, and recycle their solar panels. And as Steve mentioned, prior to this, I spent 20 years at the Sierra Club, where I led efforts to move America beyond coal, beyond gas, beyond oil. And what became clear to me was we couldn't do any of that unless we figured out how, as we're moving to this next system, we can break the linear patterns of the past and move towards a circular economy, including for clean energy. So to this question of crisis or challenge, the challenge side of this, you can see on the left side of this chart, which is basically how much solar the United States needs between now and 2030 to install each year. And basically on the far left is what we installed in 2021. And on the far right, the biggest bar chart is to be on track for 1.5 degrees. We basically need 10 times more solar installed in 2030 than we had in 2020. And we need to do that not simply by mining virgin materials from around the world, but mining existing solar panels to make new solar panels. And what's great is the National Renewable Energy Laboratory studied this. And what they found is you can recover 50% of all the silver we need, 30% of all the aluminum we need, 30% of the silicon we need, and the asterisk is in our own study, we found that you can get 30% of the glass simply from mining solar panels to get all of that solar built. So it's pretty incredible what the opportunity looks like. We launched our company in January of last year. These are photos from our facility. As Steve said, we didn't go to California. Thanks for that, Steve. You know, kicking it off nice. We're in Texas, okay? I know, sorry, but there are reasons for that. Which I'll get into. But the bottom line is we were able to get going quickly and effectively. We're now doing 200,000 panels. We have the capacity to do 200,000 panels a year. We're on track to be able to do 1 million panels by the end of this year. We've got about 35 employees on site, family sustaining jobs, really great workplace environment. And we just closed our Series A fundraising of 30 million, which builds on the 7 we had already raised. So we're really ready to scale up and meet this opportunity and get this thing to scale at the time it's necessary. So I was asked to talk about our process. We have a patented process from start to finish. What's not pictured here is that the first thing we do when we get these panels is we test them to see if they can be repaired, refurbished, and reused. And that's our first order of business. If you can, we want to reuse them on site to power our entire facility. And then we're finding buyers domestically so that when those panels reach the end of life, we can get them back and recycle them. But for those that need to be recycled, and there are quite a few that do, we have a process that removes the aluminum frames. Basically, people take these off pallets and feed them into an assembly line, and everything happens automatically after that. The frames get ripped off, the junction box gets ripped off. We have a hot knife that separates the glass perfectly from the panel. We're able to then take that glass and recycle it today in a relatively low value way, but eventually we want to be able to melt that glass back down to spec to make the new solar glass for panels that are being made in the United States, which is really exciting. Then once we've got the glass off, basically you're just left with this thin laminate of cells and silver and bus bars. We shred that, we grind it, and then we have a purely mechanical process, mostly using magnetism, that separates the very valuable metals from what's left. And that allows us to extract 95% of the silicon, the silver, and the copper. And that's one of the reasons we were able to raise the $38 million, is because people really see the potential in being able to extract more and more value so that we can drop the price of what we're charging people to roughly what it would cost to landfill. That's our vision. That's our mission, is to basically make it not a choice because we're cheaper, because we're getting more and more value out of the panel. I was asked to speak about policy considerations, and I should note that while I spent 20 years working on climate and clean energy policy at Sierra Club, I spent no time on circular economy policy. So I come to this conversation with humility and want to learn, and, you know, tell me if I'm crazy, but I am bringing at least my experience as a business person to this question. And in my experience so far, the most important thing is to recognize that solar is not like most other household e-waste. First of all, we need a lot. This is not a reduced situation, right? This is a ramp up situation. We need a lot more solar out there if we're going to save the climate. These panels last 20 to 35 years once they're out there and working, which is unlike most e-waste, and they're very bulky, right? We're talking about 40, 50 pounds at least. The ownership of these panels is very concentrated. There's something like 85% of solar in this country owned by 100 companies. Now, that's a different conversation if that's good or bad, but what it means is it's not like laptops or CRTs or anything else like that. This is a business to business challenge, essentially. It also is true that today, the volumes are quite small and very dispersed. So centralization is the key to the game right now. And then finally, there is, as I was saying earlier, significant potential material value in the panel that is quite a bit different than most other e-waste. So let me just dig into each of those points quickly and go a little bit deeper. So what you're seeing here, the headline is most of the value is in a very small percentage of the weight. It's in the silicon, it's in the silver and the copper. And so on the left side, you're seeing the weight. On the right side, you're seeing the value. So just to get a sense of what's going on, the blue in the left, 70%, that's the glass. Notice on the right side, that's like 2% of the value. Alternatively, 60% of the value is silicon, 14% is silver, 74% of the value shows up in less than 5% of the weight. So there's a lot of value in there. It's locked in there. You need technology and innovation and scale to get to it. But with that, you can get something like $10 to $25 per panel, which more than offsets the cost of landfill. So we can compete head to head with landfill once we get this thing up and running to this scale. The other point I had made was that volumes are still quite low. This comes from the seminal IRENA report, international report on solar. This is the United States, and it's looking at panel volumes in an early loss scenario or a regular loss scenario. And, you know, it goes all the way out to 2050, but you can see where we are, it's barely registering. And our own assessment is that there's something like 40,000 tons of solar panels in the United States, which is a lot, you know, or not. You probably know more about tonnage than I do, but I can tell you that there's 7 million tons of e-waste in the country, and 40,000 is not a big percentage of 7 million. It's like 0.5%. By the time you get to 2030, it's 1 million tons. So now you're talking about 10% of the total volume. It's not nothing. We need to figure it out, but we do have some time to figure it out. So that's a key point I want to make. The ownership, as I mentioned earlier, is quite unique. And the key thing to take from this is that low blue bar, the bottom blue bar on the right, that's the percentage of solar that's owned by households, residential, less than 10% in the next few years. And of that, more than half is owned by like 3 companies. So this image of like, oh, there's a bunch of individual homeowners out there who have to deal with their solar panels at the end of life. That is an important but very small part of the overall problem. Again, this is a business to business challenge that can be solved with businesses doing business. So to that point, if you want my opinion on what would be helpful on the policy front, which I was asked to speak to, move at the speed and scale of the problem. We have a climate crisis that needs more solar. We do not have a solar waste crisis that needs big, complicated bureaucracies. What we do need is to make it easier to transport and recycle solar. Currently, solar is treated like pesticides for the most part. And yet NREL again studied this question and found that even when you handle these panels terribly, throw them in unlined landfills, they do not exceed thresholds for human or environmental toxicity. So they aren't toxic, and yet they're being treated as toxic. We can fix that. Let's start with something simple like that. If I could wave a magic wand and make one shift, number two, I would create incentives for the large panel manufacturers who are locating here in this country to buy recycled materials. If they started buying my recycled glass, my recycled aluminum, et cetera, create big demand and increase what we can get on the back end so we can decrease and compete head to head on the price on the front end with landfilling. And then finally, if people are interested in seeing my company or companies like mine come to California, create circular economy development zones where you expedite permitting, you have dedicated DTSC staff, and you make sure that you don't lower the threshold of the permit, but you make it happen faster. Because when we tried to locate here, that was the major challenge, is it was going to take a year to get the permit. And then if we changed anything, it would take another year. And that just was not feasible for us. I am done with my time. So let me just end on my vision. This is our vision of what the world looks like for the solar circular economy. This is a major factory with at least 5 million panels, used panels that are surrounding our facility, that are powering a recycling thing that's doing like 10 million panels a year. And we are not only extracting the silicon, the silver, and the glass, but we're turning those into value-added products that we can sell back to the manufacturers and truly close the loop and create a massive domestic supply of the raw minerals and materials we need to save the planet. And with that, I will take questions.
I want to moderate questions, but you did it. You nailed it. All right. You got one
Yes, I do.
from the
From the virtual
universe?
audience. Yeah, we have a question from Cypress Weisberg. You mentioned you were hoping to find a higher value market for glass. What is the current market, and what do you expect the future market to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. Glass is actually one of the bigger challenges we're facing right now. I guess I'll look into this camera. The glass that we're getting is we're getting prices at like $30 a ton, but the challenge is logistics. Glass weighs a lot. As I pointed out earlier, it's one of the heaviest pieces of what we're dealing with. And so it's basically 11 cents a mile ton that we have to ship it. And so right now we're actually losing, we're a zero waste company. We're focused on zero waste. We're never going to landfill anything. And right now we're actually losing money net on the glass. In the long term, what we want to be able to do is put in and we actually are working on R&D grants to do exactly this, put in a furnace that is powered by Second Life solar. And because we're using recycled glass, you can burn it at a much lower temperature, which is much more efficient, and use no pet coke, use no coal, use no fossil fuels, and melt that glass using solar power and turn it into the next wave of solar glass. And at that point, you go from $30 a ton to like $30 a panel, because right now all that glass is coming in from China, and there's a big duty on top of it and massive climate impacts from all of that. We can skip that by taking the glass from our panels and recycling it and repurposing it and creating value-added products on site.
Hello. Hi, if you don't mind, have a couple of questions related together. Do you have any metrics on where the present stream of so-called waste panels is coming from? Are there any metrics on if there's any usable capacity left? Are they broken? Are there some that are not broken that could maybe still be reused in some form? That kind of thing. If you could speak to it, thank you.
Yeah, so one thing that would be great is if there were more disclosure requirements, because there isn't a lot of data on this. I could tell you to within a panel how many panels were installed last year, how many gigawatts are going to be built 10 years from now, but nobody's really tracking what's happening. So I can tell you from our business what we're seeing, and really the volumes currently are being driven by a combination of construction breakage. There's always going to be some breakage when you're building a project and they're broken. They can't be reused at that point. And so we'll recycle those. We're seeing, unfortunately, with climate change, there's a lot more significant weather events. And so we're seeing panels destroyed in hurricanes and hailstorms and tornadoes. And so that's a pretty big percentage of the panels today. And then there's panels that have reached economic end of life for certain reasons. So imagine a big solar residential company that manages millions of homes. Some of those homes, somebody may not pay their bills or they move and you need to sell it. Those panels may be 6, 7 years old. Those panels come in pristine shape. And those are the ones that we're able to pretty quickly either reuse or resell. But right now we're seeing that the mix between reusable versus recyclable is in the 80-20 range, but we've only been in business recycling and reusing for 6 months now. So I wouldn't, that's not science yet, but it's coming. And I think that's probably in the zone of what we're going to be looking at.
So if I might just continue a little bit, that I get it, you're about recycling them, and that's great. And I'm not suggesting you have to take on an additional role of fomenting a reuse business. Hopefully that sorting can occur somewhere before it comes to you. But I'm also seeing here another example of extended producer responsibility that you mentioned, that, a lot of these very large companies are responsible for a lot of the goods going out. So maybe there's ways that they can be encouraged to be responsible to get them to you, or other programs where they.
Yeah. So maybe sorry if I wasn't clear, but we are reusing. That's a big part of our business. What you're seeing here up on the screen, those are all second life solar panels that we've decided still have use left in them. And we're putting them out in a field surrounding our facility behind the meter. There could be up to 5 million panels like that per facility that we build. And that is the greenest, cleanest possible thing you can do. And so that is a big part of our strategy. And then at the same time, we're building a product that can be 500 kV to a megawatt at a time, that could be sold to industrial users who want to be behind the meter as well, want to use second life solar, want the ESG and green credits of reusing panels instead of seeing them recycled. And so we're working on off-taker agreements right now with people who buy our second life products. And just one clarification, I never uttered the words extended producer responsibility. But I'm glad somebody did. Okay,
We're done.
Great.
Thank you so much, Jesse. I hope you can hear this applause backstage. All right. Well, and those of you who know me know I think California needs to do a lot more to encourage these green industries to set up shop in our state if we're not going to send this stuff to another continent.